Hello, and welcome to the Totally Clinical podcast, brought to you by TechCrow. Totally Clinical is a deep dive into the freshest trends, big-time challenges, and most excellent triumphs of clinical trials. I'm Hannah, your host. Join me as I chat with industry experts, trailblazers, thought leaders, and most importantly, the people benefiting from clinical research. So tune in, settle back, and don't touch that dial. It's time to get totally clinical. This week's brilliant guest is Danielle Mitchell, CEO and founder of Black Women in Clinical Research. Danielle built up her organisation to thousands in just a few short years after she identified an urgent need for more Black and Brown representation in all areas of clinical research. The goal of Black Women in Clinical Research is to empower and support Black women to thrive in the industry through education, mentorship, and training initiatives. Welcome to the podcast, Danielle. Thank you for taking the time out to speak to me today. So let's start at the beginning. I know there's a really interesting story behind how you got into clinical research that the listeners would love to hear.
Hello, Hannah, and thank you so much for having me. So the way that I found out about clinical research, I found out about clinical research at a pool party. And so my cousin was having a pool party for her birthday, and I ran into a college classmate who told me that she was a clinical research associate. So she started telling me how she travels, how she gets to work from home. And I was immediately interested because at the time I was working in the lab, and I called it the dungeon because there were no windows, and I knew that I wanted to make a greater impact. So when she told me about clinical research, I said, how do I get started? And that's when I realized there was a lot of challenges with trying to get into the clinical research industry, especially with no experience.
It's really interesting that so many graduates don't seem to be aware of clinical research as an option. I discussed this actually in an episode with Latinos in clinical research a few months ago about the workforce shortage. Why do you think there's such a lack of knowledge about clinical research, and how can this be changed?
I think there's a lack of knowledge about clinical research because there are not a lot of clinical research programs. And since clinical research is not a part of STEM programs, then middle school students, high school students are not learning about the vast careers that are out there for clinical research. So until we start to incorporate clinical research programs into a lot of colleges or universities, or even have it to where it's an introduction to a clinical research career, then I think that there will continuously be a low number of people who learn about clinical research. A lot of times when I talk to my members, they will say that they stumbled upon clinical research, and that's not the way that it should be. We should be telling college students, telling everyone about clinical research as much as possible. And so the way that we have been able to, tackle this problem is by speaking at different colleges and universities, partnering with different organizations that are speaking to, young adults, and just telling them about the careers in clinical research. And a lot of people know about clinical trials with COVID. So this is the perfect opportunity to tell more people about clinical research. And so with Black Women in Clinical Research, we provide career services, resume reviews, interview prep, mock interviews, career coaching, LinkedIn summaries. We really want to help our members find out more about clinical research, what they can do if they're transitioning, and how they can make sure that their resume is good to go. And so, we also help our members with having different careers. We talk about different careers every month. So there's so many opportunities under the clinical research umbrella that we really want to make sure that people have the knowledge about the different career options within clinical research.
How did you initially get the idea to set up Black Women in Clinical Research?
So for me, I'll backtrack a little bit. When I got into clinical research, it was because I cold called clinical research clinics. And from there, from me cold calling clinical research clinics, I was able to land an internship. And so when I landed my internship, that gave me the foundation that I needed in order to become a clinical research coordinator. So after I landed my position as a clinical research coordinator, I attended an investigator meeting in a room of hundreds of people. There were only 2 Black women, including myself. So that's when it really made me question whether or not there was a lack of diversity in the room or if there was a lack of diversity in the industry. So after the investigator meeting, I thought to myself, well, let me create a Facebook group to see if there's anyone that's like me that's interested in clinical research or trying to get into the clinical research industry and to connect with them. So I started a Facebook group, and I never imagined that it would turn into a company.
Could you talk me through some of your proudest achievements to date?
Yes, so I'm so proud that creating Black women in clinical research has turned into a movement. We are close to, 15,000 members within all 3 of the organizations, including Black men in clinical research and minorities in clinical research. So to go from an idea, at the time I thought, well, at the most, maybe 100 people would join Black women in clinical research, but to go from that number, like that 100 people in my mind, to now thousands of members that we have helped. We have helped over 400 members receive jobs in the industry. So I know that the tools and the resources that we are providing to the members, I know that this is helping people and it's changing people's lives. And so, that's what it's all about. We want to increase the diversity in the workforce, to increase the diversity in the clinical trial population. And so I'm so passionate about helping people and introducing clinical research careers to people who may have never considered clinical research. I told myself long ago when I was going through, my clinical research journey that I didn't want someone else to experience the lack of resources with trying to get into the industry. So, creating this has become a sisterhood, a brotherhood, a community of people who want to get into clinical research or support for people who are already in the clinical research industry.
Wow, so you've really gone from strength to strength there. But when setting up any organization that shakes up the status quo, there are always obstacles that can arise. What kind of challenges have you come up against?
So in the beginning, when I started Black Women in Clinical Research, it was extremely difficult to get companies to want to sponsor. When you have a new company and you haven't really made a name for yourself, so convincing people to give Black women in clinical research an opportunity to prove that, we belong in this industry as much as anyone else, and that we can really create a shift in this industry. So, by continuously working with different companies and showing that we have talented members that just haven't been given that opportunity to get into the industry. Once I'll use, for example, I helped a company with 20 members were able to get hired at their organization. So, just proving myself and proving the company that we are a great organization to work with, that was a challenge in the beginning, just trying to build that relationship with companies and letting them know that we have talented people within Black women in clinical research that are eager and ready to get into the industry. And I would say, also some challenges a lot of times with the members is that when they are switching from another industry into clinical research, it's not always clear what position would be the best role for someone to transition to. So I know a lot of times the members are struggling with trying to figure out what is the best role for me, because a lot of people just know about being a CRA, and so they don't explore other positions and the other possibilities. So those are, some of the challenges, having a working relationship with new companies and that sponsorship. But, we've been able to push through and create those partnerships. Once we got through the beginning stages of the challenges, when we started to introduce that we were interested in sponsorships. But I'm so glad that I persevered and that I kept, talking to companies and letting them know about Black women in clinical research.
Yeah, sponsorship can always be a challenge for sure. Do you have any specific stories that stand out in terms of your members requesting advice or feedback regarding getting into the industry?
So we have a couple of members that have reached out to me and told me that they have applied for hundreds of positions. So I know we had one member who reached out to me and she said she applied for over 100 jobs with the same, resume. So a lot of times, especially if you are applying to so many positions and you are not receiving an interview, you really have to take a step back and see, is it my resume? We always are making sure that we give our members the information that they need. So we never want you to apply for this many positions and you're not hearing back, you're not getting any feedback. So a lot of times you have to switch it up. And I don't think a lot of people realize that getting into clinical research is more than just applying to a job. You have to network. Networking is a huge piece of getting into the clinical research industry. And so, telling the members how to network and how to switch it up so that you're not applying for jobs and you're not hearing back. It's important to show up to different conferences, to reach out to people on LinkedIn. You have to set yourself apart from everyone else because the clinical research industry is competitive. A lot of people are trying to get in. So how are you different from the next candidate? And we really want our members to think about that. How can you make yourself stand out from the rest?
Wow, 100 applications. I mean, that really surprises me because there's still a shortage in the industry. With CRAs, for example, they suffer from burnout. There's been the great resignation where a lot of CRAs and other site staff have left the industry. So it just seems strange that she didn't get a response.
Yes, I just know that a lot of times when hiring managers are sifting through the resumes that, depending on if your resume doesn't have transferable skills, if you don't have buzzwords. So there are so many things that go into play when it comes to your resume, making sure that you are connecting the dots for the hiring manager so they know that they should give you an opportunity. So if you are sending out your resume and you have to see, okay, is there something that I need to change on my resume? Is the person who's reviewing my resume, are they able to see why I should be a good candidate for this clinical research role? So, and a lot of times too, people look at their resumes all the time. So you think that your resume is perfect. So it's important to let someone else look at your resume and see, maybe this area is not clear. Maybe we need to, pull out some more of your skills. And so it's just important to make sure that your resume is that walking introduction that you need in order to get you in the room to have an interview.
Great advice, and thank you so much for joining me today, Danielle. It's been really fascinating learning more about Black women in clinical research and the important work you do. Before you go, could you tell us what's coming up next for Black women in clinical research?
Yes, absolutely, Hannah. So we just launched our Clinical Research Her campaign where we want people to go out and talk to their community and tell them about clinical research. A lot of people don't know what exactly is clinical research. So being able to talk about your career and how you are making a difference in the clinical research industry, we want to have those conversations so people are aware, so we don't have people who say they haven't heard about clinical research. So if we are consistently having these conversations about clinical research, then our community will be more aware about clinical trials and how it's important for them to get involved. And we are also doing our mentorship program. Our mentorship program is going on right now because we realize that in this industry that we don't have mentors and there is not a path saying, okay, this is how you get into clinical research, or this is how you level up in your career. And that is so important. And I know that the mentorship program has helped a lot of members with thinking about which direction they should go when it comes to their clinical research career. And in addition, we are also planning the Black Women in Clinical Research Conference in October. So I am super excited about that. This is our first conference, and it is really refreshing that we are going to have a conference where we get to talk about topics that we want to talk about and that are important to, Black women in clinical research. So those are some of the upcoming events that we are doing. And in addition, I'm going to be at pretty much all of the clinical research conferences as well. But, we really want to make a shift in this industry. And I am doing my part to make that a dream, to really help change the industry and have those difficult conversations with people.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and I hope you'll come back and update me on your progress.
My pleasure, Anna. Thank you for having me.
And that's your dose of Totally Clinical. For all the listeners out there, you can follow TechRow on LinkedIn and Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, download the Totally Clinical podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Google. See you on your next visit, and remember to bring your friends. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.